So the description of how Savitri had grown from the exceptional woman that she always had been to the realizing of that other being that she really embodied, which she in the beginning was not aware of. Because when the divine takes on a human birth, he puts on, or he or she puts on humanity completely in a total manner. And therefore, Savitri also has to do her yoga, has to grow into becoming who she is, which, as a matter of fact, is something we all need to do. We all are essentially divine. We all have to slowly grow into becoming who we are. So here, Savitri has been living in the forest. You take the thread of the narrative for a whole year, with the foreknowledge that at the end of the year, Satyavan, who is actually the soul of the earth, will die. Death will come to take away this being. She realizes that her purpose for coming on earth is to challenge, to oppose, to conquer death. Until then, she had never met with any difficulty, so she had not needed to become aware or capable of all the possibilities that were there in her. That's one of the things that difficulties do for us. You become aware of how strong you can be, how you can overcome the present problems. Unless you have a problem, you can't overcome it. So if your life has been very simple and beautiful, you can stay pure, but you never grow into what you can become. So here, this is the line on page 13. There had she grown to the stature of her spirit, because she found herself in an environment where everything was exceptional. The tall mountains, the titanic silences, that's such a phrase, the vast rivers that came flowing down those mountains. Everything there in the wilderness that surrounded her was grand and great. And so she seemed to assimilate, to absorb that strength, that grandeur, that quietness that comes with having no distractions, no running after all kinds of satisfactions or desires. She didn't have that. That was not the kind of life she led for the past 1 year. So there had she grown to the stature of her spirit, the genius of titanic silences. That spirit, genius is spirit, the power and strength of the silence, steeping her soul in its wide loneliness. She, the individual, became one with that vast, infinite forest, and had shown to her herself's bare reality. That is what we have to find. There is an essential reality in all of us, which is covered over by all kinds of screens and envelopes and coverings, all kinds of, you might say, movements in our being which we call ourselves. Our likes, our preferences, our activities, all the things, and you say, this is who I am, this is what I feel, this is what I like. And she has been as if fate has put her in that condition where all these have been taken away from her. She has to find her essential self. And therefore mated her with her environment. Its solitude greatened her human hours. The human being becomes part of the world he lives in to a large extent, and very easily affected if we live in an environment where there is a great deal of pollution, not only external pollution, but pollution of thought and feeling and all the, you might say, play of opposite forces. It's difficult to remain untroubled. We are caught in the current and flow of different movements and forces. Here, the beauty, the quietness, even the simplicity of that life, because she lived like an ascetic in a small hut. So all the dependence that we have on the external pleasures, all this is gone. Mated her, became close to that world which she essentially belonged to, with a background of the eternal and unique. That's the one thing which is behind all, supporting all, holding up the universe. All this play of multiplicity which has its foundation in that oneness. And this is an interesting sentence. A force of spare, direct necessity reduced the heavy framework of man's days. Spare, in one of its early meanings, is very thin. So, necessity, what are the things we essentially need? Basic requirements, very little. The rest is the heavy framework. All the things that they are like ornaments or accessories to our daily existence. I want this, I need this, I can't do without this. But when you have to, you learn that you can. You have to do without. You find that the most things are not essential. Very few things are essential. Extremely few for survival. So this is, usually we live in the framework. We don't have time for the essence. This framework, it is as if had been removed for her. Because she came from a royal family. She had grown up in splendid surroundings. She had never lacked for anything. She took wealth and luxury for granted. All this was taken away from her, so that she had to find herself. No external connections with the play of the surface of existence. So reduce the heavy framework of man's days and his overburdening mass of outward needs. This is the thing. We are so dependent, all of us are, on the outward needs, to a first thin strip of simple animal wants. That's the minimum. Food, raiment, shelter in its most simple form. All the rest was taken away from her. It is as if she was being shown by that guide who had always been with her the way to her essential truth, to find out really, because otherwise we lose our way. Sometimes we take lives to find our way. We've lost our way. because we chase so many other paths. We run around in circles. But her life had been reduced to simple animal wants, and the mighty wildness of the primitive earth, and the brooding multitude of patient trees, and the musing sapphire leisure of the sky, and the solemn weight of the slowly passing months had left in her deep room for thought and God. It's almost as if not just the guide, but nature, in different parts of the book also, he gives, nature is not simply the, you might say, a place or the backdrop of our existence. Nature participates in our existence. Nature has a spirit. Nature has a consciousness. And if nature can be like the tree, for instance, patiently moving towards the sky it cannot ever touch, but it quietly climbs up to the sun and the sky, constantly, uncomplainingly. To get this, he's given a consciousness to the world of nature. The brooding, constant, meditative, you might say, upward movement of the trees. Perhaps we can learn from them to have this constant upward movement in our natures. It takes a long time. The trees don't complain. They can't reach the sun. They can't touch the sky. But they continue. And the mountains also aspire to reach the highest. So in the world of matter, in the world of life, in the world of nature, there is this consciousness that is at work. The mighty wildness. That means here, wild in the sense, all the sophistication of her earlier life had been replaced by absolute simplicity. Perhaps one of the reasons why men who were seekers often went into the forest or near the mountain. Perhaps they could feel closer to the divine. It's not the question of running away from the world. That is what Mother and Sri Aurobindo have told us, that you have to take part in the world. And can we still feel like this even though you take part in everything? But to start with, in the beginning, there is perhaps a need to establish that inner communion. Once that is established, you can take part in anything and not lose that connection. So here, Sri Aurobindo repeats it at different places also, the influence of the environment that you find yourself in. So if you surround yourself with what is noble and great and grand, without your being always aware of it also, that those vibrations, that atmosphere enters into you, changes and molds you into something. He speaks of it also, if you have read The National Value of Art. It was written in the beginning of the 20th century, not now. And it was the utilitarian age, where the mentality was what he describes as of people living in ant heaps and beehives. It's just the need to, that small, cramped cities where people are concerned only with acquisition and gather as much as they can of whatever is available, and the whole nature and consciousness is turned in that direction. So it changes. Their inner being has no chance to grow. They're concerned only with the external satisfactions. And so the power of the surroundings, very necessary to choose the right surroundings, the right environment. So that musing sapphire leisure, even the sky, quiet, undisturbed, that is overhead, so had taught her quietness, silence, because the knowledge that she is going to lose Satyavan, a human being who has been told that on such and such a day you will lose the person you love most. You will start losing him from that same moment because of the fear and the anguish. She had to prepare herself. And on the contrary, she had learned to become quieter and stronger because she has to face a very strong opponent. So had left in her deep room for thought and God. There was her drama's radiant prologue lived. Because the drama will take place today. That was the day. The whole year was the prologue. Beautiful because she had discovered not just the beauty of nature, but the beauty of love, the beauty of her inner life. A spot for the eternal's tread on earth, set in the cloistral yearning of the woods and watched by the aspiration of the peaks, appeared through an aureate opening in time, where stillness listening felt the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. This is the kind of place, a spot for the eternal's tread on earth. Because this is where one can, places like this, one can feel the consciousness of the Creator much more than when one is preoccupied with one's own surface life. And it's as if the whole world becomes a kind of a sacred, holy place, set in the cloistral yearning of the woods. Cloister is a monastery. So you have the notion of, it is as if the whole forest was like a place of meditation. Indeed it was. Those who lived in the forest were all seekers. They were living in hermitages. They had not come to the forest because they were tired of their ordinary life. They had come because they were looking for something other. So this, it's as if, again, this image of the yearning of the woods, the trees aspiring upwards, helping us to move, raise our consciousness upwards. This is something Mother has advised also, that if you want to widen or heighten your consciousness, you sit under a tree. And the presence of the tree, it is such a powerful conscious presence there. You allow yourself quietly to feel that, and maybe you can become part of that. Or look at the ocean and just quietly allow that presence of the ocean to expand your nature. The ego becomes, at least for a while, the envelope of the ego falls, you can become wider. So nature does that. Nature has a power of changing men, human beings. That's perhaps why all seekers from the beginning of time have been attracted to the world of nature. The cloistral yearning of the woods, and watched by the aspiration of the peaks, again the same thing. The aspiration of the mountains, going up. Without vacillating, as Mother's prayers always say, that her aspiration climbs up like a flame that doesn't flicker. Whereas we may aspire, but our aspiration is not constant. It flickers. It's not steady. The mountains are steady. They only want the heights. Appeared. This spot appeared through an aureate opening in time. Aureate is golden. It is as if this had come, and there is again this, what you get in these very long poems, anachronism, because this has come after she found this place, after she had made her long journey, which comes in the canto, The Quest, and at the end of that quest, she finds this place, the forest, but there is a clearing in the forest, and it's golden. And there at the end of the clearing, on the other side, she sees a figure, a person. And without knowing who she is, she knows that this was the person she had come looking for. So it was a kind of an inner guidance that had brought her there and made her break out of that long journey towards the goal, and suddenly that moment comes when you find the goal. So it's like a golden moment. So, and the place was beautiful there. There were flowers, because it's a clearing. There were flowers. There was the birds singing. It's not the dense forest. There are patches of light in the forest. Normally the forest is dense and it is dark. But there are moments which are golden moments. Just like in life also you have golden moments. Where stillness, listening, felt the unspoken word. This is it's a line full of suggestion. Where the silence is full of, you might say, not word in the sense of a force of expression. The silence is not necessarily a blank, empty silence. There are silences that are rich with truth, which are unexpressed, but it's there. Those are the greater silences. You go deep into the silence, you might find the power, the truth that is at work in all things, and that is the conscious force. Word is basically a projection of sound, but that sound comes from a certain inner consciousness. When that greater consciousness has not yet found perhaps the right moment to manifest itself in sound, but it is there. It's not an empty silence, it is a very rich silence. That's the kind of place she came to. Otherwise, we often have moments where we are silent, and because we have nothing to say, because we are empty, because we are dull, or we sink back into a certain state of ignorance. That's not the silence that's really, it's going back into the darkness. But that stillness which is rich with all possibilities of creation and manifestation. In that silence, this felt the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. We are on page 14. So that kind of place where it's as if the place itself is meditating. It's entering, plunging into the wealth of the spirit. That is meditation. It's not emptiness. It's richness, which is as yet unexpressed. And the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change. As if it was a moment that was eternal. Because it was going to lead to grief. That year on the human plane, on the human level, that year that she had lived in the forest would, on the human level, end in loss, in grief, in the death of Satyavan. But sitting there was that consciousness, that atmosphere, that there is something that will not ever move towards grief. So the conquest over death is already suggested. Death is what takes away everything and changes everything. But this is the world of eternity and permanence. She had lived there for a year. Here, with the suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent, changing to rapture the dull earthly round, love came to her, hiding the shadow death. An advent is a coming, but of a divine coming. It's not just the coming of somebody, an ordinary person coming somewhere. Advent is something of a spiritual order, something that is divine. So love is something divine. Love is the projection of the divine force that comes to manifest itself in the world and fill it with joy and beauty and harmony and perfection. And death is what stops it. The smallness, the inability, the incapacity of earth and man to be able to receive this power because we are small. So the love that we receive often becomes small, it becomes dark, it becomes self-centered, possessive. But love is the universal power which has come out of the divine and he has projected it, and this is the creative process. This is the mother, this is the force of evolution, this is the Shakti, you can give it whatever name you want. But it is a power that has been projected out of the divine. So this is the main issue of the canto. Love that has come down, embodied here in Savitri. Death, which is the state of, which is the expression of our imperfection, our smallness, our weakness. We cannot bear the pressure of so much greatness. And therefore we break down under the weight of that greatness. We fail because there is a very strong downward pull towards ignorance and unconsciousness. And as long as that is there, death will be there. Death still is there because the downward pull is there. So this is the combat. That power that has come to raise the earth out of this lower consciousness, lift it towards the heights. Again and again this power has come. Again and again there has been a little progress. Again and again there has been a refusal also, a failure of coming down, back into weakness, back into ignorance. So this is the main issue, the coming of Mother, the coming of Sri Aurobindo also, to confront the opposite force of ignorance, which will eventually always lead to death.
This one line I don't really understand, which is repeating the marvel of the
first descent is that the original, you might say, projection of into earth consciousness that came out of the divine.
So her love, feeling
not love. Her love. Her love was
it's like a repeat
of a repetition of that original power. The original, you might say, emanation of projection of the Supreme.
Of love, actually. Of love into unconsciousness.
Yes, it is. That is what that is creation.
Love
It is love.
the same.
Yes.
Marble of the past descent. Marble of the past descent.
First descent, because that's the way. Before that, there was only the transcendent. There are three aspects, isn't it? So if there is the supreme transcendent, there is no world, there is no creation, there is nothing. At some point, why did the divine create this universe? From where did he create it? Out of himself. Because there was nothing but he. He projected his power, which is the power of love. That is why in one of her talks, Mother says, often it is mentioned that this universe is created by Ananda, but I would say it is created by love, which is the same thing. It's the power of the divine love which has come down on earth and has accepted to be outwardly apparently separated from the origin, but has created this whole world of multiplicity. But it is the same principle, the divine principle. But as it moves further and further away from the origin, that love becomes apparently less and less divine, though it is not. Like you can compare it with the sun's ray. The sun's ray is projected, that is a Vedic image, projected from the sun. But as it moves more and more towards the earth, the brilliance, the golden brilliance of the ray as it is from its source is much less. It is diminished as it touches the earth. But it's the same ray, the same principle. It is perhaps we cannot bear the pressure of such a strong descent. So it accepts to be covered over. And the conditions of our darkness, the conditions of our incapacity seem to outwardly win, but it doesn't really. Because again and again this power is essentially divine. So the love that this poem is a love poem in a way. Why in a way? It is totally a love poem. It is the Divine Mother's love for the earth. Then Satyavan is the earth soul. It has come to release the soul from its acceptance of bondage to ignorance. As long as that ignorance is there, there will be death. But death does not want to give in because he has been mastering, controlling manifestation from the time that there was a kind of separation. Separation gave way to darkness. The one becomes the many. So there, what Sri Aurobindo describes as otherness of self. The one becomes other than himself. If he is light, then there is also the presence of darkness. If he is great, this is small. That is part of the game. From there to return back to the origin is the purpose. So, love, repeating that, so she is that original divine love, which can change the dull earthly round to rapture. Even our ordinary love, even the lesser human love, can at least for a while make your life beautiful. Because something of the principle of the divine is there, hidden in the very heart of love. It is there. However diminished it is not diminished. We can't bear it, we can't take it in. So we reduce it to our size. Well might he find in her his perfect shrine. That is the thing. We house love. That huge universal principle has come down into our small natures and it has become small. So our love becomes petty, selfish, egocentric, and therefore love has no home. Love has nowhere to stay. Love is looking for a home. That is also a tradition in the Indian mythology. There is no home for him. So he likes to enter into everybody to find a home. But it's not perfect. In her, he at last found the home, which was worthy of him.
Of love. Of love.
Love found in Savitri, that home where he could dwell without being reduced, without being darkened. He has entered into you and me, but both of us are not perfect. So the love that we house becomes just like when you pour a beautiful, you might say, crystal clear water into a dirty jar, the water will not remain clear automatically. That's what happens to us. Because our beings are impure, imperfect. And so whatever we feel is an expression of that impurity. But essentially it's the same principle, isn't it? So, well might he find in her his perfect shrine. Because then he explains, since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, ever since the evolution of consciousness from below upwards began, it is because of this power of love. The growth from below that is climbing towards some kind of greater perfection is because within us that principle of perfection is hidden. And slowly it wants to express itself. Since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race, but we do our best not to resist. We try to reduce the love to our size and not to widen our natures, to perfect our natures, but bring it down to our level. So it becomes something that is the cause of so much pain. One of the most important or commonest forms of human suffering is caused by love. The inability to know how to love. And so it is replaced by hatred and jealousy and quarrel and all kinds of whatever is the opposite of love. It is because of love. It becomes vital, it becomes possessive, it becomes violent, it can become anything. Through it all, slowly, because we realize, is this really why we are? That force is at work, and gradually there has been some kind of progress. Man is not just a mental being. At the core of his being is the need to love. There is a heart behind all these things. But if our hearts are small, then naturally that love becomes small and unclean. And so, this is a wonderful line. Never a rarer creature bore his shaft, that burning test of the Godhead in our paths. Shaft is the arrow. The God of love is often depicted as shoot. It's a force that goes straight, so it's like an arrow. But what is this arrow? What is this love? It is a test of how divine you are. If you know how to love. It's a burning test of the Godhead in our paths. It's difficult, when an arrow hits you, it's always difficult, isn't it? It's a test. Can we bear the pressure of love? Only if in us the divine consciousness is moving towards expression. We don't come down in love, we rise, we grow, we open ourselves. So it's a line. But it's so difficult that usually yogis and seekers say stay away from this, because it will distract you, it will take you on the wrong path. Just concentrate on the spirit, just concentrate on your soul, and don't get caught up in this word called love. It's not by running away that you have a total experience. You have only the knowledge of the spirit. What about that being that is there inside us, which is capable of manifesting the divine? The divine has come into us. Why can't we not manifest him? We have to struggle, we have to suffer, we have to purify our nature. So it shows how divine we are if we know how to love. It's a test. It's usually painful, difficult.
Rarer case, bodhisattva. Never a rarer case, bodhisattva.
Shaft is arrow. The God of love is depicted as if he's like a sun that throws his rays. So we have the image, traditional image of the God of love shooting arrows at people. Why is it? It's a symbol. You get hit by an arrow, you fall down and die. Or at least you get wounded. Love seems to wound you. To be able to bear that shaft joyfully, happily, it's not easy. You have to be very strong to be able to bear the touch of true love. Otherwise you break down under that pressure. That's why a lightning from the heights on our abyss, another image for love. In our world of darkness, it's lightning. It cuts across the darkness in a sudden flash of light, but it's short-lived. So she is like that.